Hello, my wonderful pen friends. Welcome back to The Pen Habit, and we're going to be back to another review. It's been a while since I've done an actual honest-to-goodness review, but I'm back from the Chicago Pen Show. There'll be some stories coming out about that soon. I think I'm going to have a special guest, and we're going to do a haul video, show you what we picked up while we were there. So in any case, until then, today we're going to be talking about the Gamma Supreme. So here is the pen. And in case you are wondering, yes, this is a gigantic pen. This is officially the largest pen I own. It is an Indian-made pen from the company called Gamma. So a little bit about the company. Gamma is the in-house brand of Gem & Sons, which is a writing instruments pen retailer in India. They've been around since 1920. They are now third generation owned. They're in Chennai, India, which is one of the areas where there's a lot of fountain pen manufacturing still happening. And Gamma is the in-house brand of that retailer. I purchased the pen from asapens.in a while back. I've actually had it for a couple years, and I just inked it up a little while ago for the first time. So I thought I would take you through the pen, show you all about it, and then talk about, is it worth giving it a try? So here we go. So this is the Gamma Supreme. So you'll notice right away, I mean, up against, this is an A5 pad of paper. This is a mammoth pen. Like if we're going to do the hand, you know, I can't even hardly fit it all on my screen here. But just for comparison's sake, this is the Gamma Supreme. This is a Platinum 3776. It's a huge pen. And we'll get to the comparisons a little bit later on. But that's kind of the main feature about this pen, so I wanted to mention it here. It's actually too big. And I rarely say that about a pen, but this pen is huge. So if you got gigantic hands, this might be a pen you want to take a look at. The pen is made out of ebonite. It's got black ebonite finials, and then this lovely olive ripple ebonite throughout here. Got a gold-plated clip, which kind of tapers down to a point, and a gold band here. This is not something you see on a lot of Indian-made pens. Then the barrel tapers down a little bit to another flat end down here. And it's hard to see on the camera. I think there you can go. It just says Gamma right there, G-A-M-A. And, you know, it's a pretty standard flat top shape. It's kind of reminiscent of the old duofolds, but much larger. Then you uncap the pen, and it takes quite a few turns to uncap it. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and a quarter turns to uncap the pen. And underneath you have just a mammoth black ebonite section. This pen is an eyedropper pen, meaning that you have to fill the barrel of the pen with ink. And being such a large pen, it's probably not surprising that it has a huge ink capacity. I was able to fit 5 milliliters of ink inside this thing. So this pen will hold a lot of ink. Comes with a gold-plated steel nib, and it just says Iridium Point. So IPG, Iridium Point Germany nib, although it doesn't say Germany, it just says Iridium Point. And it doesn't have a nib size designation, so it doesn't say fine or medium or anything like that. I had a hard time determining exactly what size nib this was. It looks very similar to a number 6 size nib, but maybe a little bit larger. It's not as large as a number 8 size nib, you know, kind of standard Bach-Yovo size nibs. So it might be a 7-ish. On the website for AsaPens, they call it a number 10, but this is not any number 10 I have seen, so that must be using a different numbering system. Has an ebonite feed on the underside here, and that's about it. I will say, I'm not going to unscrew it because the barrel's full of ink, but the threads on the barrel are very, very tight. Now, in terms of construction quality, this is a pretty inexpensive pen, and some of that inexpense shows in the fit and finish of the pen. It's nicely made, but it's not pristine in its assembly. So you can feel the joins here between the finial, especially here on the top. The bottom finial is actually pretty smooth. The surface has got a little bit of pitting, but the big thing, and especially you can see it down here on the black finial, is you can still see all the tool markings for where this was on the lathe. These are all handmade, so the sizes are all a little bit different. They're not never going to be exactly the same. So the measurements that I'm going to give you a little bit later on come from the Ace of Pens website. I didn't bother measuring mine. I did weigh it, and when I weighed it, it was a weight that is with a full barrel of ink. So big honking pen, real big honking pen. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, a little bit too large in the hand for me. So you can see here, I mean, that's a big stinking pen. And the widest point, or the section here, goes between 13 and, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Sorry, about 13.8 and 15.4 milliliters, which is really, really wide for a grip. It does taper down a little bit, which helps with the ergonomics a little bit. So if you're the kind of person who tends to really hard grip your pens, or you've got arthritis or things like that, and the fine muscle dexterity is a little problematic for you, a larger pen like this, especially because it's fairly lightweight for as large as it is, might be a good option for you there. All right, before I dive into the writing experience on this pen very much, I do want to say a quick thank you to Goulet Pens, who provided this Pelikan Edelstein Smoky Quartz for me to kind of review, and they gave me an extra bottle to give away. So that will be coming up. Make sure you check penhabit.com every now and again, or follow on Facebook or Twitter, and I will announce when the giveaway for this starts. It will be starting in the next week or so from when this video is posted. So just keep an eye out for that. Anyway, and thank you to them, the good folks at Goulet Pens. All right, now getting down to the writing. In the past, I have had issues with a lot of nibs that come on my Indian pens. Sadly, this nib was not an exception to that experience. So the nib is kind of a no-name, what they call an IPG nib, or an iridium point nib. It's not a brand name, Bach, Jowo, Schmidt nib, anything like that. It's just kind of a generic nib. There's nothing wrong with that per se, and I've had some of those generic nibs that are really, really good riders. This one is actually a pretty good rider now, but when I got it, the nib slit. So the way they normally make nibs is they stamp the nib out of the sheet of metal. They solder the tip, or not solder, but weld the tip on, and then they use a saw to slice the nib slit through the tip and the face of the nib. Most of the time, after the nib slit is cut, some extra work is done on the nib to take it from parallel to kind of a triangular, a very, thin, narrow triangle toward a point at the top. That helps aid the capillary action toward the point. It also keeps there from being a big gap in the ends of the tines. So usually if you have the tines together pretty closely, the tip of the tines very closely together, you're not going to get a lot of problems with baby's bottom or having to polish the inner margins or scratchiness, that sort of thing. So it looks like on this particular nib, they cut the nib slit, polished the nib, and sent it on its way, which meant that the tines had a gap like that in them. Now that's a pretty easy thing to fix. You just take if these are the two tines, you just take them, cross them over until you bend the metal a little bit, let them snap back, and keep doing that until they get close together, and then you can polish the tip. So that's what I did, because I couldn't get the pen to write at all. Once I got the tines together the way they were supposed to be, it wrote really nicely, and I haven't done any additional work to it. It's just that it feels like that work was not done when I purchased the pen. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to price, but this is not a terribly surprising. It's unfortunate, but it's not terribly surprising, because this is very similar to experiences I have had from other pens that I have gotten from India. Not all of them. Some of them I've gotten have been in really, really good shape. So I don't want to paint a broad brushstroke here about quality of a pen from a specific country, because that's not it. It just happens to be this one particular pen. The nib was not properly set. Okay, so that being said, the only adjustment I made was to bring the tines closer together and make sure they were in alignment. So now let's see how it writes with that done. So this is actually not a bad writer once I got the ink actually flowing. It's not a super polished nib. I'd say the feedback is somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. It's right on the verge of still being okay. It's very pencil-ish. Doesn't feel super smooth. That's pretty easy to fix if I wanted to. I don't know that I do, but it is simple to fix. It's actually a pretty good writer. I don't have any scratchiness. So it works really well. And it's an eyedropper, as I mentioned earlier. So the ink flow isn't terrible. I'll scoot this up a little bit. Eyedroppers, it's actually pretty darn good. Eyedroppers do have a tendency to run wetter and have far fewer of the ink starvation problems that cartridge converter pens have. Now, one of the big problems with eyedroppers, and I've talked about this before too, is that with the heat of your hand, sometimes they can burp. The heat of the hand, it causes the air inside the barrel of the pen to expand and can force some of the ink out. I haven't had the problem with this. I feel a little concerned about the possibility simply because this feed doesn't have a lot of fins. So it doesn't have a lot of area to collect excess ink. But like I said, this pen holds like 4.5, 5 milliliters of ink. So I filled this a while ago and it's still mostly full because I've got about 30 pens inked right now coming back from the Chicago show, and I haven't been able to use this as much as I'd like. That being said, I haven't had a single burp. It's behaved really, really nicely for me. So in that respect, I got no problems. It is a steel nib. You can push a little bit of variation out of it, but it's, as I say so regularly, that is not what it was intended to be used for, so don't expect it. In terms of reverse writing, it's not bad. It's a little bit scratchy. Finer nib. And as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't sure, the nib doesn't say what kind, on the designation, what nib gauge it is. So it doesn't say fine, medium, broad, that sort of thing. I would put this pretty solidly in between a European style medium and a European style fine. It's not super fine. It's not super wet or wide or anything like that. It's just kind of a fine medium. And it works pretty well. Now, I will probably still take a little bit of micro mesh to the nib tip, despite what I said a little bit earlier, and just go ahead and smooth out the tip just a tiny little bit, because you know me, I like my pens a little on the super smooth side. So aside from that, though, it writes pretty well and very consistently once I got the nib working. Now, the grip is, I mentioned this a little earlier as well, so I'm going to repeat myself a bit here, but the grip is really wide. It is the widest grip of any of my pens. So it's a little on the uncomfortable side for me. Now, I've got large-ish hands, but I don't have huge hands like a lot of people. So I think if you've got larger hands or you have a hard time finding a pen that fits in your giant your giant paw there, this might be a fun one to play around with, and it's not very expensive. So I bought this Gamma Supreme from Ace Pens in India, either toward the end of 2015 or the beginning of 2016. I forget which, and I'm not always the best about keeping records about when and where I buy my stuff. I bought it with a couple of other pens, which I've already reviewed. And this one was something of a lark for me. I was like, oh, let's get it. It's not that expensive. And that's really, in my mind, one of the best-selling features of this pen. This gigantic mammoth pen lists for $42. It's really quite affordable. So if you need a big pen with a mammoth ink capacity, $42, I mean, it's pretty darn good. You can't get a lot of pens for under that price range, especially not super big ones like this. They're handmade. They're made of ebonite, so if you want to experience an ebonite pen, this would be a really affordable way to do it. And if you're comfortable with working on your nibs, I can say, yeah, I can recommend this. A couple of things you have to deal with is the extra thread count. 4 1/4 turns to take the cap off isn't ideal. And this is an eyedropper, so if you're not a fan of eyedroppers, this might not be the right fit for you. But for $42, give it a try. Can't hurt. Now, I will say I bought this a while ago. I did go back to the Ace Pens website when I was doing the research to get this ready, and they said they were out of these. So if this is something you're interested in looking for, you can check a few other places or reach out to Ace Pens and ask them when they expect to get more of these in stock. So there we go. $42 for a gigantic pen. I call this my baseball bat pen because it is just shy of a baseball bat. I feel like I could go out and play t-ball with this thing. It's a pretty good writer. Once I brought the nib tines a little bit closer together, it seems to be well made, although the fit and finish is a little bit lackluster. So can I say that I love the pen? No, I don't love it, but it's good, and it's really good for what it is and for the price point that it is. A handmade pen for $42 out of ebonite that writes and has a mammoth ink capacity. So that is my review of the Gamma Supreme. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you again to Goulet Pens for providing the ink for this video and for the subsequent giveaway. Again, don't forget to check out penhabit.com for whatever giveaways and stuff I have going on. And if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated the video, please give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel. You can turn on notifications to be notified when I upload new videos. And we are getting close to the end of the season. It's coming up here pretty soon. So I'm finishing up a few videos, getting the top 10 and top 5 lists together. So make sure you stay tuned for those coming up soon. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you here on The Pen Habit. Bye. The problem with that is it leaves a parallel channel down the nib, which does not really aid very much in capillary action. Most nibs, when we get to